Hello. Welcome to Africa. Good morning, everybody. So I am, my name is Siisi. I work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I work in the Business Diplomacy Department and I work with African markets. So happy to have you all here. Today we have this event organized in collaboration with Foreign Ministry and Startup Estonia, and we are also using very happily and effectively some European Commission funds for the event. So without me talking much more, I'll invite you here first a representative from Startup Estonia to give welcoming words. Please.
Hi, so great to see you all. Good morning. Great that you came here so early. I hope the coffee was good. So I'm Kille. As Siisi said, I'm representing Startup Estonia. Together with me is Annika. So together we make sure that the visionary founders would come to Estonia and find their journey here welcoming. So we are the project leads for Startup Estonia, or Startup Visa. And also we are providing ongoing support and guidance to those who have already come here and rooted themselves here and would like to venture into international markets. So, before we get into details, I want to thank Siisi and Daniel from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for taking us on board and inviting us. It's a first kind of event for us in a sense of it's a new concept, happy to be part of it. And based on what we have learned from visiting and our experience in South Africa, there's a lot of untapped potential there and ways that Estonian companies could benefit from. So hopefully you will seize and dive into the opportunities and realize there's a lot of help and assistance, support available for you. So without further ado, Daniel, do you want to come and take the stage? He is the expert on all things Africa. And so I will not keep you waiting any longer.
Nii, kus mu slaidid?
Tahad seda nuppu ka? Teen ühe liigutuse veel. Saab sellega ka liikuda.
Good morning. I said good morning. So now, if you guys all want to be active in Africa and you want to be doing things with Africa, you got to get used to that. Every time something starts in the morning, they say good morning and they expect a response. So the second one was much better. I'm Daniel Scher. I'm the Ambassador at Large for Africa from Estonia. I'm also accredited to South Africa and to Kenya as ambassador, non-resident. My main tasks are to support Estonian companies on their path to Africa, and of course bringing the continent and Estonia closer together. We have, of course, lots of other players in this area, and I'm happy that a lot of them are in this room today, and they'll be giving you little presentations about how they can help you on your path to Africa. And I will also be speaking about what the Estonian Foreign Ministry, in particular our department for business diplomacy, how we can help. Let me just have a look here. I got that one done. So I know that there's a lot of people who are very familiar with Africa, but as everybody isn't familiar with Africa, so you can see it's a very large continent. If you look on the map, you can see that Russia is on the map wider than Africa, but actually in reality, the distance from the west to the east in Africa is wider than Russia. So again, lots of it's a big continent, many countries, and lots of opportunities. As you can see, just some of the general statistics. It's a very large population, 54 countries. There are 55 recognized by the African Union because there's a border conflict in Morocco linked to Sahara. And there's over 1,500 languages. Young population, and those numbers that you look at, the GDP, the numbers are growing regularly and getting only bigger. I like to bring out this map because it gives a little bit of a vision that you know, in some cases, unfortunately, Africa is thought of as, you know, as a country, or even the countries that are in Africa are very, you know, homogeneous. But you can see on this map that the different groups are very varied in the entire continent, and it's important, you know, to go on the ground, to understand the reality on the ground, to visit these countries to better understand the opportunities. A little bit of the challenges that are facing that Africa is facing. Large part of the population is young and under 25, and at the same time there's the question of job creation. So whoever is able to come to Africa and help in creating jobs together will definitely be very favored and will be very much of interest for the governments and for the leadership in African countries. The corruption question, you know, that always comes up. People ask about it. These are the numbers in terms of perception, which are done by organization Transparency International. So I mean, it's a question of how do Africans themselves feel about corruption. Of course, each country is a little bit different based on what the legal systems are. So again, this is not something you can paint for the whole continent in the same way, but each country is different, and that's why we're here also to help you. We have, of course, the immigration topic is always on the picture in Europe. We in Estonia, we're trying to help and do this in a regular way with our nomad visas and our different products in these areas. Our universities as well doing this, helping the immigration in a more of a regular fashion. I think very important is the number that we saw about the intra-African trade. One of the big challenges is that having access to your neighbors, selling across borders is in some ways difficult because of logistics, but also because of the legal system. In Estonia, for example, inter-European trade for Estonia is 60% of all of our exports. And I think that what you see on the further slides, that actually this point is also one reason why there are some opportunities in Africa.
I have a question. You said Estonian is about 60%, but Estonia is like working to neighboring countries.
Yes.
But intra-African, you mean outside of Africa?
No, inside of Africa.
Ah, okay. Even inside.
Yes,
okay.
so they export outside of Africa. 80, well, the numbers keep on changing, and the numbers are different by country, but overall the continent is somewhere, I mean, over 80% of the trade is sent out of the continent. Hoe zei dat dan zo? Yes, please.
I haven't thought about it, but when
Well, the immigration is a challenge, a legal immigration, but we're trying to do that in a regular way. But the other side of things, we're trying to help them build the situation on the ground by cooperating, by creating more jobs in Africa to keep. I mean, at the end of the day, the reason you move is because you need to have food for your family. You need to have, you need to provide for your family. So most of the people want to stay home. Our former president, Kersti Kaljulaid, when we traveled to Africa, always said, that for example, the accountant in Cameroon doesn't want to leave Cameroon to go to the next door country to do the bookkeeping. They would want to do it virtually from their own home. So I mean, it's creating again that ecosystem that makes it easier for these people to access markets around them and surprise. Because I mean, even those who are educated and have the skills are also having difficulties finding jobs. Yes, please. Well, I hope that when one of our speakers, who's a founder and who is from Africa himself, will be speaking, I hope that he will be able to cover these points in more detail. But I mean, of course, I mean, English and French are two of the languages that are very prevalent on the continent. Of course, Portuguese in the former Portuguese colonies. So we are here now on the opportunities in Africa. As you can see, what I was mentioning previously about the intra-African trade recently was, well, not that recently now, so I think it's 2 years or 3 years ago, they signed the African Free Trade Agreement. It's being slowly ratified and implemented by all of the 55 member states of the African Union. And the goal is, again, to simplify this trade between countries. So again, I think anything that targets how to simplify trade with the neighbors will be very much of interest in the continent. The same again, the young population. There's a workforce. There's still a lot of very good universities in Africa. They are looking at smarter ways of training this workforce. We were also recently in Kenya, where we were surprised to hear that the programmer hour that they pay, the hourly rate for programmers, is now higher than one in Estonia, because there's just such a high demand as well for the programmers. As you can see, anything to do with digital telephones, SIM cards, all of this is exploding. The payment system, probably one of the most famous, is called M-Pesa, which is a mobile payment system started in Kenya, and it's just exploding. I mean, they always ask us, well, what solutions do you have in Estonia? Well, we pay directly from our bank, so I mean, there in still M-Pesa, you have to charge money onto your M-Pesa account, and there's always that one step that we have already jumped past. But there's new solutions being created every day, and there's also companies are doing e-ID. They're creating ID solutions that companies can use to simplify their e-commerce on the continent. Yes. Everything is used. I think it's where Estonia says that, come and try your solution here in our market to see if it works. That's a lot of African countries are also offering some similar opportunities, because the markets are very open to trying new things. And yeah, so cryptocurrencies, different things like that are very much in use on the continent. So a little bit linked to the opportunities as well. When you're choosing about where to go, the continent has a lot of regional organizations. So this is a little picture of the scheme, where in the European Union we have pretty much just one organization that encompasses everyone. The big box is the African Union, and then you have different areas. So you can see in North Africa, East Africa, Western Africa, Central and South, different groups. Some are more political minded, some are more economy and business oriented. For example, the East Africa community has a single visa for the entire region well, I think it's some member states who went a little bit faster in their process. So you simplify trade opportunities. Some areas for example, in Western Africa have a common currency. So there's different types of ways of targeting the continent. You don't have to look at the entire continent as one and large entity. You can take them in small. This is a little bit old document because, for example, the East African community has already become larger. There's new members such as the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so this is continuously developing. But one suggestion is definitely to if you don't want to focus on a single country, take one of these organizations. There are also funding opportunities not only at the country level but also at the regional level. The EU has a lot of regional pockets, envelopes to fund different activities. And this is a little overview of our coverage in the world. You can see in Africa we're a little bit lagging behind. We have one embassy in Egypt, and we just recently, together with our dear friends at Enterprise Estonia, I was able to be at the opening of our trade office in Kenya. So unfortunately, that is currently our official representation in terms of how can you say embassies and offices. But we are getting better in terms of our coverage with honorary consuls. And unfortunately, here also we're missing Angola, which I just opened in August, where we have a very good honorary consul. And these honorary consuls are also there to help you to have access to information about the market, and also to help you find contacts and help you find opportunities that you might be looking for in those countries. And we are, of course, working on strengthening this representation that we have. So a little bit about what we're doing in general in Africa. So in 2020, we just before, of course, before COVID, we put together our strategy for Africa. We're focusing on three main things. One is the normal bilateral relations and political relations with the countries. Then we're focusing on development cooperation, where we have chosen 4 priority countries: Kenya, Botswana, Namibia, and Uganda. And then for business diplomacy, we also have the same countries, and instead of Uganda, we have put in South Africa. And as I mentioned earlier, we chose South Africa and Kenya to be really the main focus, with me being accredited to those 2 countries. As you can see, we also have some ambassadors who are also accredited from Europe to Northern African countries, and again, as I mentioned, our honorary consuls network that we're working on. Last year, we organized the first Africa Business Forum here in Tallinn. We had 200 participants from 25 countries. I think for the first time, and because of budget reasons, the planning period was a lot shorter. So we were quite happy with that result, and now you can see we've already put in place the date for next year's event. And it's put in place for that date for 2 reasons, because it's immediately followed up by Latitude 59 and also by the e-governance conference taking place in Tartu. So hopefully we'll have a so-called Africa Week with a big presence during that week. And then just in general about how we can help you in Africa, as I mentioned, any sort of country-based information. Some briefings as to, again, we don't have full knowledge of the 54 countries. However, there are some countries that we know better than others, of course, our priority countries. But again, if you have some questions and you need some help in terms of some general knowledge that you can't find from Google, please don't come for the general, more specific questions. The more information you can give us, that makes it easier for us to find the right partner to answer your questions or to help you. So again, consulting, finding contacts. One of the big roles again that we've taken together with Enterprise Estonia is organizing visits to our priority countries, and we have a visit of the health sector going to Kenya in November, which will be followed by another visit to South Africa, to the Africa Tech Festival, where there will be also an Estonian pavilion. And next year we have also a series of events and visits planned to our priority countries. So I mean, these types of networking events, as we're hosting today, in 2 weeks we'll have also a deep dive into Kenya in general, as our trade representative will be in Estonia. So these types of events will be due regularly, and again, if there are special requests or some topic that you would like to be covered, please indicate that to us, and hopefully also with Startup Estonia we'll continue having some events in this direction. And then also through our development cooperation projects, we have also various trips going, and of course I think one of the most interesting projects that we'll be doing is together with Latitude 59 in Kenya, where you'll hear a little bit more about later today. So again, we're here to help you, and please reach out to me at any time. These are my contacts. I'm here to help you. My job again is to connect you to the people that you're looking for, to make these contacts between Africa and Estonia. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope that the day is of great use for you. We have an interesting program and some African food snacks as well after for lunch. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. We are now moving to our next presenter that will be over the video from London. So let me try to work the magic with this to get him. I see him already from here, but so that everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Wait, Anthony, others can't see you yet. But almost, now they can see you and hear you.
Can everybody see and hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, good. Fantastic. I'm just going to get my screen share so that you can see everything. So just let me. Okay. Share the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Fantastic. Let me just get started. Fantastic. Okay. Are we ready to begin? Can I take over the show for a little while? Fantastic. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for having me this morning. I'm tuning in from London. Forgive me, I wasn't able to join. Unfortunately, I've got other commitments where I had to be on the ground in London. But thanks to Daniel and all the team for having me. I've been asked to come and do, I think I've got about half an hour or so to do a bit of a presentation introduction to the African tech ecosystem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a little bit out of an overview of what the African tech ecosystem looks like, what are some of the key opportunities and growth areas, and what are some of the key resources that you should be looking at when it comes to considering your research and approach to looking at the African tech ecosystem. But before I do, just a little bit of background about myself. Who's this guy in London that's talking to you about the African tech ecosystem? So my name's Anthony William Catt. I've been in the tech and startup and investment space for about a decade now, initially focused on European tech, having worked across Europe with early stage investors, but specifically previously working with funds in Southeast Asia that were looking to invest into prominent European tech companies. One that you guys might be familiar with is Money's, the mobile fintech bank. We helped do their Series A, and I was an observer on their board for about 2 years. But back in 2015, I volunteered to go to Sudan to understand a little bit about the entrepreneurial ecosystem there, which I didn't think really existed. And so going out in 2015, I discovered there was this huge wealth of talent and opportunities happening on the ground where entrepreneurs were solving really critical problems they were suffering locally, but weren't able to scale those up because of the challenges around technology infrastructure and understanding for how you build businesses across borders. And ever since then, I've been slowly become obsessed with not just how you bring technology into these emerging ecosystems across Africa, but actually the increasing growing set of opportunities across the continent, from education to finance to agriculture to climate, that are not only challenges being faced in countries across Africa, but are challenges we're now starting to face across the world, and the potential opportunities that African talent, resources, and ecosystems are going to have to solve global problems in the next 10, 20, 50 years. So since going on that journey, I spent time with Google for Startups, specifically working with investors in Europe who wanted to access opportunities in Africa. And that includes working with the Black Founders Fund Africa. And that's a fund that Google have put together that's invested in about 120 different companies across Africa. I'm also part of the African Angel Academy, so I'm an early stage angel investor across Africa in tech. But my kind of core focus is my day jobs, Ventures 54 in London, Africa. So London Africa Network is a network of about 350 to 500 people across the UK that are in that Africa tech startup corridor. So this is founders, investors, corporate government leaders. And effectively what we did was we created a neutral space where these people can connect, learn, and share together. So we run quarterly events in London. We have an online Slack community. We use Notion. We've got a directory of resources. But really all it's about is connecting people in that UK Africa tech corridor who want to learn, share, and collaborate together. So if you're ever in London, look up when we have our events. You'll all be welcome to join. I'll make sure we get some free passes for you. But my main focus and my day job is with Ventures 54. So Ventures 54 is really a culmination of all the work I've been doing on the continent since 2015. And we're really focused around kind of 4 key areas. The first area is around helping African founders to become investment ready. So this is founders that are looking to scale their fundraising capacities to access international investors. So we work with governments, DFIs, and others to build programs, initiatives to support those founders with fundraising. We also then work to provide skills, resources, and infrastructure for international tech ecosystems that want to enter Africa. So whether that be a corporate, an investor, or a hub that wants to build partnerships on the ground, we help build various initiatives and programs, interventions to support that. And then do a lot around community best practice for certain industries. So we work a lot with investors who are looking to access opportunities on the continent, but also investors on the continent that want to raise capital internationally. So really what we're trying to do is build bridges between the UK and the various markets across Africa, which I guess with Daniel's team is very similar to the things they're trying to do to help you look at opportunities for expanding to the continent as well. Alongside that, I work in the kind of event space across Africa. So I host a lot of different events, facilitate a lot of different conferences, of which I think Daniel mentioned there'll be the Africa Tech Festival down in Cape Town. I'm also based in Cape Town half the time of the year. So I'm based in Cape Town for their summer, then London for our summer, but really because we're building those bridges between both markets. And then finally, I do a lot of content creation around the African ecosystem, mainly to put a spotlight on the opportunities. So I have a weekly news post that goes out highlighting what have I found are the top 10, 15 things I've seen in the ecosystem. But also those of you wanting to find more events, I also run a events digest on Notion, which highlights all the top events happening across Africa, which will include Latitude 59, which I believe will be speaking to you later for their event happening later in the year. So yeah, you have the opportunity to follow me online, you'll find out more about what I do. But hopefully that's painted a bit of a picture for you about my background and experience, and more importantly, why I'm the right person to chat to you today about this. Because I think the perspective I have is similar to yours, that about 10 years ago, I wanted to understand the opportunities in Africa, and my whole journey has been around exploration of that and helping people along that journey. So hopefully the slides I present today and the conversation it's had kind of comes from that perspective. Before I jump in, though, I'm very keen, I know this is a bit of a one-way presentation and less of a dialogue, to understand what questions you guys might have around the African tech ecosystem. So if you're able to get your phones out and click on that QR code, or go to menti.com and put that code in, it will allow you to write questions you have that you want to understand about the African tech ecosystem. And I can make sure that I have them in mind when we're going through this presentation. So yeah, if you do have any questions, get the QR code up or go to menti.com and put in the code 64526097. I'm just going to make sure that I can see your answers coming through. Here we go. I'm just going to leave my slide up, but I'm going to. Okay, cool. We've got some questions coming through, so I'm just going to read some of them just so you know. Tell me more about the healthcare scene. Explore the dairy cow market. Okay, that's a very specific question. How to make money and which business models work for SaaS startups? What are the mentor or consulting opportunities for startups looking to Africa? Which country in Africa is the most developed startup ecosystem? Okay, feel free to carry on putting your questions in there, but I will endeavour to answer these as we go through. So, kind of an introduction, a snapshot to Africa. I think before I kind of jump into some of my slides, the African tech ecosystem is vast and diverse and rapidly growing. There are a number of notable things that kind of stand out at a very high level that kind of transcend any of the markets that we're going to talk about and look at, or the industries that you might be interested in. The first thing is the rapid growth perspective. So the African tech ecosystem has been one of the fastest growing in the world, from startups and tech hubs. The continent has been a huge surge in activity, particularly since around 2019 when there was a huge surge in funding. And current countries, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya and Egypt, are kind of the four major tech hubs across Africa from a tech perspective, but also from a fundraising perspective. Traditionally, historically, fintech has been the most dominant industry in the tech sector. Companies like Flutterwave, InterSwitch in Nigeria, M-Pesa, which Daniel mentioned in Kenya, have revolutionized the way people do business. And really, when you look at technology businesses in Africa, every technology business is pretty much a fintech business because it's using some kind of underlying technology to change the way it transacts with its customers. Whereas traditional banking in countries like Africa had low penetration, which has meant mobile banking and others have had this ability to just leapfrog traditional industries. Whereas obviously in Europe and the West, we have more legacy where mobile banking has taken a while to come into place, but some countries in Africa, mobile banking has been first. And I think when you're looking at the tech ecosystem as a whole in Africa, you want to look at where legacy systems haven't existed, and therefore digitization has had this kind of competitive advantage. The major startup hubs, cities like Lagos, Nairobi, Cape Town, and Cairo, based on the countries I mentioned, have become those major hubs for talent, infrastructure, and investment opportunities, and are attracting a lot of international talent to start and set up doing business in those markets. We'll talk about this a bit more. Investment influx has been a huge surge in investment, particularly from international investors, which is starting to validate and de-risk certain markets. Of course, there are a lot of challenges that remain. There are huge infrastructural deficits. There's limited capital for early stage businesses at kind of that 0 to 1 stage, which means we're not seeing as many startups come through the funnel. But then that does leave the opportunity for international businesses to enter those markets. And of course, there are regulatory and legal challenges within certain markets that make it hard to potentially do business in certain places. So we really need to not just consider what market is good for your industry or sector or your product service line, but also where is good for you to be able to set up and do business in a structured and safe way. The kind of key overarching areas outside of fintech that have had a real surge is our kind of e-commerce. There's a massive boom in the e-commerce space now. Jumia is one of the Amazon for Africa is a great example of that, and helping kind of informal offline businesses actually go online for selling commerce. Mobile penetration, talking about mobile banking, mobile penetration is kind of been revolutionary across the continent, from money to communication and obviously e-commerce. But I think the really big thing that we're now seeing on the continent is this kind of regional approach to doing business. So companies aren't now just looking locally within their markets, they're actually looking at going regionally from day one. And a lot of countries are clustering together with trade agreements and ways of doing business that allows you to say, actually, I'm not going after Nigeria, I'm looking at Northwest Africa as an entire cluster for doing business. And over the next kind of 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to see more businesses that are kind of Pan-African from day one, rather than just localized to their market. So a little bit of a snapshot there and background. I know Daniel actually talked a little bit about this, but just some snapshot facts that I like to kind of bring in context setting. 1.3 billion people inhabit Africa, which is about 16% of the world's population. It comprises 30.2 million square kilometers. It's got diverse climates from desert to rainforest. You can be in southern Nigeria, in Lagos in the morning in the city, and then you can go down to east of the Calabar and you're suddenly in what's like a rainforest climate, and then go to North Nigeria and you're in the desert. So there's a hugely diverse climate there. 54 nations across 5 distinct regions. I talked about, again, those regional clusters and how companies are doing business in certain areas. Economically varied regions. So North Africa is the Mediterranean. It's traditionally trade and tourism, particularly going to the Middle East. West Africa is resource-rich nations and agricultural outputs. East Africa is really strong. It's emerging tech hubs, particularly Kenya, and also agriculture, whereas Southern Africa is more traditionally mineral wealth, agriculture, and advanced infrastructure. And then also from doing business, the time coverage is fantastic, right? You've got 1 to 3 hour time zone difference across the entire continent. I think where you guys are now, the maximum you'll have is that one country will be 2 hours behind you and one country will be 1 hour ahead of you. So that time zone difference makes a really interesting way for doing business from Europe to Africa. So a couple of snapshots across there. I think the growth opportunities are really important to kind of talk to first and foremost. So obviously diverse markets, as I said before, you've got 54 countries, each of it have their own economic landscapes, cultural and regulatory environments. So this creates a diverse range of market opportunities, but also it really does require a localized approach. So when it comes to looking at Africa and your business, you might think, okay, we're in agriculture and we have this type of business and we think we could penetrate really well in East Africa and Kenya. You really understand, is that local market from a cultural perspective, a regulatory perspective aligned with your business? The rising middle class, so Africa's middle class expanding and it's increasing consumer spending. So by 2030, it's projected that the top 18 cities in Africa could have a combined spending power of 1.3 trillion. So entering those markets now and getting a foothold in whatever respective industry you're in could lead to really great upsides and returns for your business. The youthful demographics, over 60% of the Africa's population is under 25. It's kind of the biggest untapped workforce on the continent. You're now seeing that a lot of people are going into that tech sector and space and building out those that tech talent. So even if you're not thinking about doing business on the continent from a product or service standpoint, it could be a place that you can go for a wealth of talent to outsource for your business. Digital transformation, and obviously this is a pretty big obvious one, but with over 420 million internet users, a mobile penetration rate exceeding 80%, bigger than anywhere else in the world, tech-driven solutions in multiple industries are kind of massively kind of outdoing their peers in other markets. Infrastructure, so maybe a bit away from specific technology, but infrastructure development is critical in the space, and there's a substantial amount of opportunities in it, particularly in transport, energy, and housing. Public-private partnerships are being encouraged in many nations to boost infrastructure growth, and obviously we're seeing a lot of nations from clusters like the EU to the US to China who are coming in and investing a lot in that space. So it's actually creating a lot of opportunity for third parties to come in on behalf of international governments and international development funds to help provide some of that infrastructure. But also you as a business, as you come in the next 5-10 years, are going to see a massive upshoot in the quality of infrastructure that enables you to do business. Natural resources. So again, this might be less for the technology entrepreneurs in the room, but obviously Africa's rich in natural resources, from minerals like gold, platinum, and cobalt to agricultural communities like cocoa and coffee. So there's ample opportunity for extraction, processing, exporting, and particularly for those look at fair trade and quality of work and living, there are great opportunities where in certain countries there's a lot of exploitation around mineral extraction and natural resource extraction. So actually coming in and producing solutions that supports local producers, the local economies and communities is really important in this space. From a regulatory environment standpoint, this really varies across countries. And this is the one thing I would really recommend you do your deep research into. Again, where it's good to do business for products and services, where it's good to actually set up and operate a business. So we talk about Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt as the 4 big ecosystems. where you might better do good business with your product or service. But when it comes to operating and setting up businesses, people more talk about the places like Rwanda and Mauritius, which aren't very big markets to serve, but have created really strong regulatory, legal environments that are friendly for setting up, doing business, for getting money in and out of their countries and the continent. And so when you think about where you want to set up your business, it might be different to where you actually want to do business. And that's a kind of key differentiator you need to look at when entering the markets. Regional economic blocks. So as I said before, we're seeing several regional economic communities, such as the East African community, Southern African Development Community, and an economic community of West Africa. So actually, again, not just looking at where you're setting up business or that key country you want to penetrate, where is there a regional cluster and opportunity that will allow you to do intra-Africa trading and look at opportunities to scale beyond the borders of one country. Cultural sensitivity. So this is something I've mastered in the last couple of years, having based myself out of Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, is understanding and respecting local cultures, languages, and customs is paramount. Business etiquette, negotiation styles, and consumer preferences are so significantly different from region to region. And I think the one tip I would give when entering the ecosystems is actually who is going to be that first critical hire or advisor or conduit to that ecosystem, that person who can translate the culture, the science of a local market. So again, we think about where we want to set up business versus doing business, but also who is going to be our conduit, that person on the ground that helps us actually go to market. Economic growth. So pre-COVID, 6 of the world's 10 fast-growing economies were in Africa, and we're still seeing that rapid growth. Yes, there are challenges like political instability in some regions, but the overall outlook remains optimistic, and that is really driven by the innovation, that demographic dividends and increasing foreign investment that's coming in, and that recognition that a lot of the challenges that the world is facing are being solved already in Africa, but a lot of the world's future resources, from talent to natural resources to infrastructure, are going to come from the African continent in the next 10 to 15 years. So it's very clear there is a growing opportunity, but you should be very careful about how you approach that to get it right. A couple sources that I just want to share to you. I'll share my slides after the session that are really helpful to be doing your research on the continent. For me, looking at things, I'd be looking at Disrupt Africa, Afro Digest. My favorite newsletter is Tech Safari. So if you're just wanting to learn about the ecosystem in terms of key trends, what's happening in different communities, follow Tech Safari. It's the best community for news and resources on the continent. I really recommend following them. But again, the number of different resources on this slide that are really helpful for you to learn and understand. And again, I'll share these slides afterwards, so you'll get that information. So don't worry about having to take notes or anything like that. If you're wanting to go into the data side of things, these are the 3 sources I would use. Brighter Bridges, Africa the Big Deal, and Partech. So Partech are an investment fund. Africa Big Deal is a bit of a monthly data sheet of investments, and Brighter is a full data research platform. But all of these guys produce annual reports on the startup ecosystem in Africa. So if you want to do your research, you want to look into some of the deep dive and reports, particularly for investment, please use these sources, particularly Brighter Bridges, who are a partner of ours, so I'm a little bit biased to them. So from an industry sector interest standpoint, I could have obviously talked about just your broad sectors like fintech, commerce, health, which are over here on the right-hand side. If you want to get an idea of specifically some of the kind of problem solution areas that we're seeing growth, this map is kind of, imagine this map is 100% of Africa's business opportunities, and this is how they're kind of segmented in percentages. So at the moment, climate is one of the biggest growth areas, with about 200%, 20% growth in the last year. So solar home pits, solar energy, hydroponics, agricultural products are really, really big in that space. Fintech has traditionally been that leading sector, although it's had a reduction in investment in the last year, but it still is the leading sector nonetheless. So payment solutions, banking, crypto, asset finance, credit, POS systems, insurtech, transfers, international funding are some of the big areas for there. We've seen in kind of that kind of commerce space, we've seen the B2B commerce is growth, supply chain management, food delivery, on-demand delivery into other sectors as well, and trucking are some of the big areas. From a health tech perspective, e-farming, telemedical services, mobile medical services, med supply chain are some of the big areas. But you can see here as a spread, there is a really diverse set of areas of growth within the African markets right now, of which we're seeing a lot of duplications of Western models, but we're also seeing brand new models that are growing in the ecosystem as well. So don't just think about the high-level sectorial perspectives like fintech commerce. Diving deep into some of the specific nuances are really important, particularly if you're a service provider, but also if you're a manufacturer can potentially help produce solutions or use bases on the continent produce those solutions for you. From an industry sector interest perspective, we obviously talked about kind of the big four being Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. But also some of the other secondary markets on the rise are Tunisia in the north of Africa, Senegal, Ghana, and Rwanda as well. So these are some of the growing bases from doing a business perspective, and where some of these countries are doing really well with these secondary markets, so Rwanda, Tunisia, Senegal, and Ghana, is because of the friendly environments they're creating to do business. So if you can look at them as a springboard to the rest of the continent, it might be better being in one of these smaller markets for the ease of doing business, but then penetrate the bigger markets from a consumer standpoint. However, from a capital standpoint, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa capture 79% of all funding across the continent, which is obviously very significant. So there is a lot of interest there and a lot of investment going into infrastructure there. From an investment standpoint, and so just to give you an idea of where things are growing, this chart maps venture capital funding in the tech ecosystem since 2013. And obviously there's been a massive growth curve since then, particularly 2020 to 21 to 22. Now, this is data that was captured in the first half of the year. So for 2023, it's not accurate. That is a lot higher, that table now. But even when we had this economic downturn globally with investment falling off, you actually saw the least drop in funding happening on the African continent in comparison to its peers in the West and in Asia. But venture capital in Africa makes up only a few percent of global capital. So it is a very still small proportion of capital. But we are seeing that a lot of international investors now who are investing on the continent are also interested to see what businesses from, say, Europe or the west coast of America are moving into the continent and how they can back them to do that. So we should see continued growth in capital in the next few years. So what I want to do now is I want to jump quickly into some of the questions you guys had, just to make sure I'm covering off some of those before I look at some of the other opportunity points. So I just want to answer some of these to make sure I cover the ones that are right in this section. So what are the biggest challenges, e.g. gaps in regulation, rules of laws, existence of skilled employees? Yeah, so with respect to that question on the biggest challenges, regulation is a really big challenge depending on what market you're going into. So as I said before, the consideration needs to be what markets have got the best customer base for you that will want your product or service, but which countries have the best regulated markets that make it friendly to set up business, their exchange controls, so if you're getting money in and out of the country, it is really friendly. What are their IP restrictions and regulations? For example, in South Africa, if you set up business there and you build the IP in a country, it becomes really hard to export that IP into another business offshore. Whereas if you do it in, say, Rwanda or Mauritius, they've got very friendly rules around how you export and import your business IP. From an existence of skilled employee standpoint, the tech sector is definitely where the skilled employee pool is the biggest growth area. So if you're looking for outsourcing talent onto the continent, or you're looking to set up specific elements of your business operations, it's definitely looking at tech and developer talent. That's going to be the huge overarching talent pool area that you need to look at. I would say I'll share this afterwards. There's a report that looks at kind of that regulatory and working frameworks. I don't have it now, but also it's key to look at some of the countries that have got their own startup acts coming to place. So there are several countries that have got startup acts that they're pushing through Parliament and government to ensure a more fair and safe space to do business from a tech perspective, which is particularly about attracting international talent. So those startup act countries are going to be really important. there are the next question, I'm just reading through these. What are the mentor or consulting opportunities for startups looking to Africa? Yeah, so if you're looking to expand into Africa, if I'm understanding that question correctly, there are a lot of, I wouldn't say necessarily programs as such. There are a couple. So Chapter 54, and again, all these questions, I'll provide some answers in an email. So I'll give you all this data. But European VC Partech has an accelerator called Chapter 54 to help you scale into Africa. Maybe Daniel can speak more to this about what they're doing with the hub at Estonia. But a lot of governments have international tech hubs on the ground that are there to specifically support businesses that want to grow into Africa. So looking at your local government bodies that help with that expansion, but also other countries have their own hub as well that you can look into that access and help other businesses, not just from their own country. But again, I'll provide a list of those. Which country in Africa has the most developed startup ecosystem? So yeah, back to my point before, if you look at regionally, and you're probably targeting regions, in North Africa, Cairo and Egypt is the most developed startup hub and ecosystem. For West Africa, it is Nigeria, specifically Lagos, as their tech hub. For East Africa, you're going to be looking at Nairobi and Kenya. And for Southern Africa, you're going to be looking at a mix of Cape Town and Johannesburg within South Africa. But also, as I said before, Rwanda and Mauritius are very small countries where you're probably not doing much business, but are really business friendly for setting up and operating your business and getting capital in and out. So I would look at those 4 hubs as their respective regions, but also places like Rwanda, Kigali, and Mauritius for setting up and doing business. What's the smartest way to get an access to startups? What attracts them the most in Africa? So if I'm answering that question, like what is the best way to get access to startups and what attracts them the most in Africa? I'm not fully sure of the question, but what I would say from my experience, if you're targeting a specific market in Africa, say Nairobi in Kenya, if that question was alluding to, you need to be on the ground. And it doesn't mean full-time on the ground, but if you're going to do business on the continent, even if you're a digital business that has a remote team, you fundamentally need to get on the ground for a short period of time, going back to what I said at the beginning, to understand the cultural nuances of doing business. Don't talk about M-Pesa and financial technologies. Fundamentally, the way things are done on the ground can be fundamentally very different how we do things in Europe, mainly because we don't have those legacy systems and infrastructure in place in, say, Kenya that we do in the UK or Estonia or other places. So you need to be on the ground just to see how people work and operate before anything else. And it goes back to that second point. If you want to do business in Africa, you need to find who is the version of you on the ground that's going to run with the business if you're not going to be there yourself full time. That person who has that localized knowledge, context, and nuance for the marketplace. Other questions we had here, how to make money and which business models work for SaaS startups. That's quite a broad question and quite hard to answer without the kind of context of what your business does. But I'll share some resources on the SaaS market. There's a report actually on SaaS business in Africa I can share. They're told there are 1,500 languages in Africa. How many languages are supported by example iOS, Android, or Meta apps? Really great question. I actually don't know. And it's actually about 2,000 languages. So I can't answer you that one, I'm afraid. And yeah, the other questions are very specific to certain industries. So I'll make sure I get answers to those questions for you. So I know I'm conscious of, I see it's about 11 o'clock now. Daniel, I'm conscious of what time is and you guys need to now have a break. You're listening. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm conscious I've only got 10 minutes. The other slides I have are quite easy just to read through, but I'm actually quite conscious. Do other people have questions in the room that I can answer while I'm on the call now? Because I can share my slides and information straight after this session. But I'd rather right now, if we've got time on the call, is there any questions people have that they want to ask? And I can just share the slides and resources in an email for everyone afterwards.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, let me put the
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear
I can
me?
hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you. You have been talking about like a tech businesses, but still there is a myth that you rather go physical, not like technical way. I mean, no internet, just go physical products is the thing to sell. Is it a myth, or is still like real things, real physical objects, like economy is the first thing, and all the rest is coming? Could you just rebut this myth once again? I mean, there's
yeah, sure. So I couldn't fully hear. It was a bit echoey. But were you asking? If I can repeat the question, you're asking.
For example, in some regions there is no electricity. There's some things which you assume are not happening. For example, should we assume like a different reality, or it's still kind of Europe-like style life somewhere happening?
Okay, so and you can ask the question, I have to get it wrong. So yeah, when it comes, I mean, firstly, again, goes back to the question. If you look at Africa as a continent, and I say Africa broadly, Africa is 54 different countries, right? 5 regions. But even if you look at, say, South Africa, where I'm based, the disparity in communities and markets is so vastly different. If you're in Cape Town, you feel like you're in Lisbon. But you go half an hour out of Cape Town, and you're in one of the townships like Kairichi, right? It's almost alien in its nature in terms of, they don't have technology infrastructure. People don't know what taxes are because they're not paying taxes. They're not plugged into the system. So when it comes to approaching the markets, you need to see everything as a bit more nuanced in terms of different locations. So if you're looking at South Africa, you're fundamentally not serving all South Africans. And if you've got a business that's could be applicable, like a mobile banking business, not everybody in the continent's going to be able to access that because they don't have the infrastructure. So I think when it comes to making assumptions about the markets you're operating in, this is why it's really important to go on the ground and speak with those operating in those markets, because they're going to be the ones who are going to fundamentally tell you not just who needs your business, but actually who can access your business. So if you are a digital technology business, yes, in theory, that gives you the access to scale out based on what the digital infrastructure quality of a market is. But but the restriction is if people don't have access to digital infrastructure, they just can't do business. Where if you're a hardware business or you're a product business, your challenge might be distribution and access to customers, but ultimately your advantage might be that is a product or solution that people who are not tapping digital infrastructure will need more. So you need to ascertain within those markets actually where are those clusters or groups of people that you can serve, but it is going to be based on what the infrastructure availability is like. But that's probably one of the most growing opportunities right now is how are the informal economies, those people that are not online, that are maybe not trading in your traditional routes using online banking, how are those informal economies being digitized and creating opportunities for new bins to be done? So if I'm an investor, for example, I know the one area we're looking at a lot is where are these informal economies where trading is done offline, and how are they being digitized to bring those people into digital markets and create opportunities? Does that answer your question? You're welcome. Do we have other questions? Or is there other information people would like? Because I can then produce more information and share it in a pack for you afterwards. One hand. One hand's better than no hands. Sure. Okay. I'm stealing your time, Daniel. You should have let me go. I'm going to do something even better. Where is it? Let me get this slide up for you here. This slide will help. You can also connect with me here while we're talking. Yeah, go ahead with your question. Sure.
Hello, I have a question regarding Kenya. This summer, Kenyan government applied the digital service tax. So what is your opinion about this tax? Because this is influencing all the, also the big companies and also the startups who have to pay the additional tax for the digital services. So how do you think how will impact the environment of the business environment of Kenya?
Yeah, so I'll put it back. So you're asking about the that app introduces about 3% tax on digital on income earned from transfer or exchange of digital assets. Yeah. Okay. So the interesting one with this, and it's going to be more about how other countries regionally react to it. So the act of that kind of 3% tax on income earned, what it was really trying to target what is the larger enterprises, right, that have come into various African markets, particularly in Kenya, to try and tax those larger organizations. But the knock-on effect is it is having an effect on the startup ecosystem and these entrepreneurs. It's too early to tell what the effects of that look like, because the natural thing is if you're getting taxed 3% and additional tax, you're not going to want to be taxing that in the country. So it will be medium to long term, we'll see if startups leave. However, the question now is, will startups want to set up and do business in Kenya and operate out of Kenya, or expand into Kenya? Ultimately, I think what we're going to do is we're going to see a knock-on effect into other countries as similar things are adopted. Otherwise, I think it's going to simply put companies off coming into Kenya. However, the upside of the Kenyan tech ecosystem, from a talent perspective, an infrastructure perspective, investment on the ground, is extremely high in that country. So you might say that actually that cost of doing business will have a larger upside for my business because I've got better talent, better infrastructure, better standard of living, and access to more capital in Kenya as compared to some of its peers regionally. So I think you maybe asked me that question about 18 months to 2 years' time, but I think there is an offset of the quality of what you can achieve in Kenya. But at the same time, for a lot of people, if they can find elsewhere, they'll probably go elsewhere. But you probably need to see what that looks like. But really, in the short term, it's been to tax some of the larger corporations as much as the startups.
Thank you, Anthony.
Perfect.
Yes, everybody can be directly in touch with you, and we are also hoping to see you in Tallinn in one of our wonderful events. We have, or in Estonia, if not in Tallinn particularly.
Yeah, I haven't been to Estonia in a while, but I definitely come back. But also for those of you who might be coming to Africa anytime soon, we're based out of Cape Town. You'll get my details in an email with the slides. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm always happy to answer questions or make introductions that might be relevant to your business. But yeah, thank you guys for having me today. Enjoy the rest of your session. I'll let you go for your short break, but look forward to catching up with you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
So we are going to have a 7-minute coffee break, and then we are waiting you back here.
Or tea break.
Or tea. There's